And a big part of that for me was I started debating because I moved to Australia from South Korea without speaking English.
Really?
Without speaking English.
Okay.
You know, one of a handful of Asian kids at the school. And I found that debating was the only place where when I spoke, no one else did.
When I watched the presidential debate a couple of years ago.
They agree each other, right?
Yeah. It's
Okay, I agree with you. Okay, I respect with your
The
perspective.
debate is success.
Yeah.
Convince the other party.
I think there is less engagement between two parties.
I won the World Universities Debate Championships for Harvard in January 2016. And I had been debating for about 10 years up until then. So that was the height of my loving debate, feeling on top of the world. You know, I was a college student.
Oke, welcome to Total Politik. Ya, itu ini kalau host cabutan tuh kayak gitu.
Yes, of course. Kurang satu frekuensi kita.
Betul. Harusnya salah satu aja yang ngomong, salah satu lagi
salah pula gue kali.
Tapi nggak apa-apa.
Udah dipaksa salah pula.
Ini lagi trial kan sama seperti orang debat. Orang debat itu kan belum tentu di forum pertama, ya. Itu lu harus langsung jago, langsung memenangkan dan langsung bisa meyakinkan lawan debat lo. Nah, jadi butuh proses sampai akhirnya lu bisa meyakinkan. Makanya kadang-kadang debat itu atau berargumentasi yang baik itu bukan sekedar jam terbang. Bukan sekedar lu kosakata lu cukup banyak nggak untuk bisa merangkai kata-kata. Bahasa Minangnya pabrik kata-kata lah ya.
Iya, betul.
Tapi juga gimana lu punya argumen yang dalam yang pas dengan waktu yang cukup. Nah, itu yang kayaknya harus dipelajari, ada pelajarannya.
Betul, semua politisi harus belajar ini kan.
Betul, biasa aja lah gaya lu ya. Dan salah satu buku yang akan dirilis sebentar lagi buat Anda semua ya, politisi, mahasiswa, caleg-caleg, atau mungkin Anda yang ingin istri-istri yang merasa tertekan oleh suaminya ingin berdebat. You can have this book ya.
Kembali suami yang mau mendebat istrinya lebih tepatnya.
Oh iya, karena yang lebih jago adalah istri ya untuk berdebat. Oke, kalau kita berdua bujangan ya, kita sudah tahu.
Betul.
Ya oke. Ada buku baru yang mungkin Anda bisa baca, Anda bisa pelajari untuk bicara dan bisa mengetahui gimana sih jadi pendebat yang baik dengan argumen yang prima.
Betul sekali.
This book title is Good Arguments
by Boso.
Written by Boso. Okay. Dan we have two guest stars today.
Kita punya dua narasumber kali ini dan salah seorangnya adalah penulis dari buku Good Arguments ini. Kita perkenalkan Mr. Boso.
Hi Boso.
Greetings. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you Boso for coming.
Mr.
And I know you cannot relate what we opening.
What's the opening?
I trust opening? You. I hope it was a good I hope it was positive.
Of course, in politics, it's the business trust.
Dan satu lagi kita akan ada seorang peneliti juga yang juga mengetahui menjadi bagian dari
founders dari
Eduquip yang sehari-hari mungkin dia paham betul gitu ya, dan merasa bahwa ya berdebat itu adalah bagian dari keseharian orang-orang politik gitu ya. Ada Kristi Ardiana.
Hello, Kristi.
Apa kabar?
Baik.
Okay. Thank you for coming, and then thank you Bo and thank you Kristi to coming to our podcast.
Yes.
I'm excited to have you both here, and as you know, our name is Total Politik. So we talk about politics, we talk about the political person, we talk about the politician, we talk about the public policy and so on about the politics. And politics is very relate to debate.
Yes.
For the good argument. So first thing first, I want to talk about the people first. Kristi, probably you can answer. I heard that many politicians in other countries were in debaters.
Yeah.
In their high school era.
Yeah, when they were in high school, when they were in university. So that's they have a very good basic
Yeah.
to become a good debater.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, that's true. So actually.
Bisa lebih dekat lagi?
Okay. Yeah.
Nah.
Alright. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. That's true, Mas Budi. So basically, that's also why we both contacted you, because this is what we see right now is very important in Indonesia, right? Because we're going to have our general election next year. It's going to be a huge election.
Yes.
And there are a lot of values in debating that we can learn as the people to be also great like voters. So in the past, for example, Malcolm X was a debater. Hillary Clinton was a debater. Oprah Winfrey was a debater.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Oprah.
Yeah. So there are a lot of like really
I thought Oprah is a good digger. So
that too maybe, yeah, but like so there are a lot of very important people who started from like debating. They learned debating as well. So yeah, I think there are a lot of values that we can learn through debating.
Okay.
Yes.
What do you think?
What do you think, Bo?
Well, I think a lot about what those people might have learned from debating. And I think it might be two things. One is that you can have a voice and have a voice in the public square and have people listen to you. I imagine the two of you might have had to go through that, and Kristi, you too, at some point. And before these people were leaders, they were spokesmen for their interests and their views. And a big part of that for me was I started debating because I moved to Australia from South Korea without speaking English.
Really?
Without speaking English.
Okay.
You know, one of a handful of Asian kids at the school. And I found that debating was the only place where when I spoke, no one else did. And it was a kind of promise of attention. And I think a lot of those leaders, many of whom start off as outsiders, find in debate a place in which to be heard. And I think maybe related to what Kristi was saying and might be relevant to the big theme of the podcast about the importance of talk and conversation, not only to politics but to society, is for these great leaders, it's not just an instance of talking to people who already agree with them. It's about convincing people who don't agree. It's about talking across our differences. It's about finding strength in our differences rather than just weakness. And I think debating might be one really useful training ground for that.
Yes, but I have a question. We live in the post-truth era, some says, where the truth is, where people trust what they want to trust, where truth is altered. So how do you convince people in debate in such a society?
It's such a wonderful question, and it's a hard question. I think the first is what I am arguing for is a culture of debate that probably needs to start very early. So if we can teach young people as an important part of what the education that's required to be a citizen in this kind of era, that you have to demand in conversation for evidence, right? For argument, for reason, and not just emotional appeals. I think that can be helpful. The other, which is maybe more practical, is when we're having an argument with people, I think one of the skills you learn in debating is you ask the other person, what will it take for me to convince you?
Oh, you can ask them right away.
You can ask them, right? and I think this is something we often forget in disagreement is we can talk about the conversation that we're having and we can ask questions of the other person. And so setting a standard for what is truth, I think that can help us get across some of those difficulties.
Okay. Very good question, Divyo. I will to ask you what the difference between debate before the digital era and now in digital era, when you know that the post-truth era just come and people live and their echo chamber, you know. So they bring they go to debate with their own perspective, and it is so hard to make him difference. What do you think?
Quite right. I mean, I wasn't alive in the pre-digital era, so some of it is guesswork. But I think things have changed a lot. On the positive side, actually, we're living at a time where people have a platform and a voice and an ability to speak in a way that they did not before. Right. So we're living in a fuller, richer public square for that reason, but it comes with problems too, of the sort that you're describing. So one thing that comes to mind is there was a time when in the US presidential election, in the first televised one between JFK and Richard Nixon, where the opening statements were about 7 minutes, right? And they had to prepare something. 7 minutes is a long time.
Wow.
Right? So you have to have something to say. Whereas now
it looks like it's boring now.
Exactly.
In this now era.
Quite right. And that's reflected in the fact that now the opening statements are 1 to 2 minutes. Right. And even then, it's going to be cut up into 15-second clips to go on social media. So debating, I understand, is an activity that trains your attention. It rewards your attention. But it also requires it a little bit too. So I think that is the great challenge of the digital era that you've identified, which is how can we have these conversations at a time when attention, our most precious commodity, is in short supply.
Okay, Kristi and Bo, we already have the debate ecosystem, debate traditions on social media, on television, probably talk show politics, but it's not really a very tough and very hard battle debates on the presidential debates. What do you think?
I think that is actually a very good point, Mas Budi. When I watched the presidential debate a couple of years ago.
They agree each other, right?
Yeah. Okay,
I agree with you. Okay, I respect with your perspective.
Debate is success.
Convince
the other party.
I think there is less engagement between two parties. Well, I think if you wanted to have a fruitful discussion, right? You can say, "Oh, I don't agree with you. We have different policies," but how can we actually have a fruitful discussion that makes people that watch the debate understand what are we fighting for? And I think to echo what Bo said as well, what I learned in debating is also to understand how to do better storytelling, right?
Better storytelling.
Yeah,
Okay.
because
but you have a very very tight time, right?
Yeah.
To
that's exactly
to convince.
right. Because I started debating when I was in high school, and in debate we're assigned to be proposition or opposition, and we don't know yet, right? So I think it kind of pushes people who do debate as well to understand that there are always two sides of the story, and you have to build your case. You have to tell people why is it important. And I think in the presidential debate sometimes we forget to say that this is a very important policy. They focus on this is what I want for me to win. And
there is no differentiation between one candidate to the other candidates
and
here. But we have a very tough debate on the television and the social media.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think it's there is this culture that you kind of try to be more reserved because you're I'm the presidential candidate or something, which I think you could have been better in terms of that. We imagine that the perfect style of debate is a U.S. presidential candidate between Trump versus Biden, Trump versus Hillary. That's very good show, good debate, good differentiations.
It's or inlander minded sees that U.S. is always better than us.
This is your television background. It makes for great TV.
What do you think? Is that very a perfect presidential candidate debates like a U.S. presidential debates?
I think it's far from perfect.
It's far from perfect.
Far from perfect.
Why?
I mean,
why?
so
there is a battle there.
If you have on one extreme that kind of politeness where we hear one another out, but ultimately think, I disagree with you, and there's nothing good to be gained by having this conversation. There's just the way there's something missing from that. And to pick up on Kristi's point, the great joy of debating is when one person says A, another person says B, through the conversation, you sometimes see that it's C, right? So there's something creative about that exchange. That's what you miss out on. But on the other hand, the US presidential debates of late have become either a kind of shouting match, a name calling, bullying performance, or a kind of press conference, two press conferences unfolding with no contact in between, right? So there's insults, but there's no genuine kind of conversation.
Okay.
So of the two types of conversations you've described, one where everyone is very proper and just expressing their views, the other one where it's brutal and it's almost like a battle. I'm trying to ask the question in this book, what could a third way look like? What could a good argument look like? And I think debate has something to do with that. And the last part that I'll add is, in terms of what we want our political leaders to model for us, right? To model for us citizens, the debate platform is the one where they say, this is how I, as the leader of the country, deal with people whose ideas are different from my own. So it's a very important platform. And there, I think the contribution that debate can make is saying, before you speak, you have to listen, right? That's what we learn in debating. In order to make an impact with your words, you have to read the room, right? And so that attitude of saying, yes, we all want to be heard, but in order to do that, we have to first listen. I think that's something that I would like to see the leaders of the world model for us, the citizens.
Okay. Is that Trump and Biden and Hillary Clinton did those point?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And
they don't listen. They don't read the room.
It's like a press con between two candidates. So they're basically just preaching to their own voters.
It's often a sign of a bad debate when you say what you're going to say no matter what the other person says. And you can walk into this room or walk onto the debate stage having prepared your points with your team and shopped it around, and to have the conversation not change anything shows something has not happened. Some connection has failed to engage, right? And to come about in
they
the conversation.
Don't rebate each other.
Can you give can you give an example why they didn't do the good debate?
So one thing that I remember in those debates, and these were really kind of an important debate, this is the Trump-Clinton debates, in even how I came to write this book. Because I won the World Universities Debate Championships for Harvard in January 2016. And I had been debating for about 10 years up until then. So that was the height of my loving debate, feeling on top of the world. I was a college student. But then 9 months later, the debates between Trump and Clinton happened. And it showed me that not only can debate go wrong at that level, not only can it show the amount of division there is in a society, it can make it worse. And some of the examples of that, I think, are, first of all, neither leader often were making real arguments, right? So an argument is telling people why you believe something is true, why you think it matters, and stepping someone who doesn't already agree with you through your thinking so that they may be convinced. What I saw much more often is saying slogans, right? Or just repeating what you believed. Another one I saw is when someone makes a point, instead of dealing with them, calling them a name.
Okay.
Right? And attacking the person, for example.
Yes.
And that's not just bad because it's not good to attack people. It's bad because it's running away from the actual conversations.
Argumentum ad hominem.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think that's a couple of instances where those debates went wrong.
Okay, we go to your book, eh?
Okay.
Good arguments. Can you elaborate the relation between the good arguments in your title is and the good debates?
It's a wonderful question. And if you write a book called Good Arguments, you better know what a good argument is. And it was actually harder for me to come to that answer than I would have thought. Because you want to say a good argument has connection, it has good ideas, it has listening, all of these things. And all that is right. But the answer I came to in the end is a good argument is one in which both sides walk away thinking they would do that again.
Oh, I see.
Because they learned something, they connected with the other person, they felt they were heard, and that's all it takes for the conversation to continue.
Addictive.
It can be addictive. In my instance, growing up, not fully speaking the language, feeling different from everybody else, having that weekly time when I could talk about not just the ways in which I was the same as everyone else, but the ways in which I was different. And have that be the source of the connection was almost a magical, addictive kind of thing.
I see.
Right.
It's channel for the press there.
I think so. I think so. And
minority group. I could be cancelled because of that.
And so you
Let's
see,
beat that.
you have two people here who are addicts in that way.
I was a debater too, actually.
You were, and you're a
Yes,
third.
in high school.
Oh.
Yeah. It stays with you. And so that's what I think a good argument is. And debate is one body of knowledge, like negotiation, like political speech making or organization. It's one body of knowledge that can tell us something about how to have those good arguments.
I see.
Very good point.
That's really good.
I'll go to Miss Kristi. Mbak Kristi, can you tell about our Indonesian context in, let's say, the DPR, the DPR, the debate
Parliament.
or the parliaments, about some laws or regulations, like the how do you see the debates in the parliaments, where we know the majority of our parliament is now the government coalition, so there is no actually a democratic debate in the parliaments. What do you say about that?
I think that's a really good point and very important for Indonesians as well. I think as someone that kind of few things from the outside, right? I have never been in the parliament to debate directly with them. There's a lot of interesting thing going on. First, I think a lot of the netizens have very bad stereotypes about our parliament, right? They always say that, they don't work, they don't do anything. Some of them actually slept in the room when they were debating. And I think, I think it's really important to actually showcase what actually happens in the policy making debate. And I think through having the ability to have good arguments, right, in the parliament as well, if a lot of our parliament members who actually wanted to work for Indonesia can show how do you argue with each other, even if it's a coalition, how do you actually have an engaging conversation for a policy that is life changing, right? Because for women, for kids, for our education, it's really important as well to also understand that in our parliament, there's actually this notion that sometimes the debate, like what Mas Budi explained earlier, there's no real engagement. There's often just hard disagreement. Like sometimes you kind of just literally right? you did something that probably
It's a bit dangerous
a
to
lot
say.
of people don't understand, right? Why can't we have a better culture of having a better discussion? Like, okay, I think your point might be wrong. This is not good for this policy, for example, but we have a better and more productive conversation, like what Bo said. So I think it's important to
I have another questions, but it's the political stage where you seek supports from your from the voters. You cannot let yourself losing to your opponents. So I think it's a bit I think it's a bit interesting when both say that debate is to convince each other. If I'm a politician, I
have to win.
Yes, I have to win. If I get convinced by my opponent's ideas, that means I lose.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
And I will lose
Yes.
my support also.
Yes,
Yeah,
of course.
I think if you have a vision for Indonesia, right,
Uh-huh.
you have to have a better maturity to understand
I
that
see.
Yeah.
debate is not just about winning or losing. I mean, when we did competitive debating, of course we wanted to win, right? Who doesn't want to win?
Yeah.
But if you're talking about it in a political realm, like
Yeah.
especially in parliament, it's about how do we make like the best and the most effective policy. So it's, I mean, and then I think probably Bo can talk more about this in terms of how can we have a good conversation without showing that, oh, we're actually the weak side, we're actually wrong.
Yes,
But
yes,
it's like, it's more, in my view, it's more about how I can have something to offer, Mas Budi can have something to offer, Mas you can have something to offer, and Bo can have something to offer. We might disagree with each other, but the outcome of the policy actually is about the whole disagreements that we had, and we understand we're here because we're the parliament members, we're for the people, and we're mature enough about it. It's not about me anymore, right?
So you see consensus in there.
Yeah, you see consensus, compromises.
Compromise.
Yeah, I think that's important.
What do you think, Bo?
Such a rich set of discussions there. I would add two things. So one is some of that dynamic you're describing that affects politicians need not affect us, the citizens.
Okay.
Meaning, when we're just talking with our family members in the kitchen,
Yeah.
we don't need to pretend we are politicians on TV, right? So that
True.
means we can lose. And
Oh, I see.
and the experience of debating for me was losing again and again, except one or two times, right? And knowing that even when you lose, you might lose when you're correct because you failed to be persuasive. There'll be another opportunity for you to have the discussion. So the first is separating out what we do as citizens as what public figures do. Right? So I think that can be helpful. And I think the second, even at the level of the politicians, is one of the things you learn to do in debating, sometimes you forget to do it, is you have to let the debate end. Right? So debate is one way of talking about our differences, but being able to say, okay, now we had our disagreement, let's pause, and now we can reflect on that debate. We can talk about what just happened, right? And that's finding a different way of talking about our differences. So debating is one way of having a good argument, but it's not the only way, and letting it end so that we can do and find other ways of talking to one another, I think that can be useful too.
I
see.
Very
Very
good point.
interesting. So so we have we already 30 minutes here. So this is the little bit last questions.
Correct?
We talk about the ordinary citizens.
Yeah.
You know, what debates can help us as ordinary citizens?
I think I would answer that through my perspective as Indonesian who has lived in Indonesia for most of my life.
Yeah.
I think looking at the context of Indonesia, Mas Budi, Indonesia is very diverse, right? It's a multicultural society, religion-wise, ethnicities-wise, languages-wise, right? So I think obviously it is inevitable that we disagree all the time, right? I disagree with my parents all the time, for example, sometimes. But it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be like a bad disagreement. I can say that, oh, I don't think your way works for me.
Yeah.
I will find my own way. And that is like we grew up in the same household, we have the same religion and all that. Disagreements can happen there, especially if, let's say, we meet different groups of people, right? Different, like what Mas Dio said, like minority groups and all that, which definitely have very, you know, a lot of differences. So I think what I learned in debating is actually empathy, Mas. So empathy in the sense that I love reading since I was a kid, but like debating totally changed my world because I had to speak on behalf of people that I hadn't taught before, right? Well, like obviously as a young person, Gen Z / millennial, like I'm in between that, right? I always thought like, okay, the left is better, like Democrats is better, pro-rights and all that. But through debating, I actually learned about what the Republicans has to offer, for example. And I was like, oh yeah, actually, it's not that the other side is completely wrong, right? Or like the other side is completely bad. It's more about understanding how to have empathy for different group of people. And then through that, you can have a good discussion and acknowledge that, okay, my background might be different with you. Bo's background might be different with Mas Budi's background, Mas Dio's background. But how can we talk as an ordinary citizen and we can be friends? We can, you know, have very good, enriching conversations. Like after I met you, I'm like, oh, that was a really good conversation. I wanted to have like, you know, conversation with you again. I think that's what I learned through debating for quite a long time. What do you think, Bo?
The lesson learned for the ordinary citizens.
Yeah, so the book is now, or it will be out in 10 languages, right? So I've been to many countries where people say there isn't a culture of debate, this feels different, it feels like something far away. But I think there's one place where people are debaters, and that's when they're young, right? So people are born debaters, in my view. If you think about the babies in your life, or the kids who are just starting to speak, they're always kind of arguing, right? And they're pushing your buttons, and they're arguing things they don't even really believe, right? So they just to annoy you a little bit, just to say, what about this? What about this perspective? And so I think that urge to find out about the world through disagreement is something that we really share as human beings. And it's about, as citizens, how do we give voice to that inner instinct that we have. And I think the advice or the suggestion I would have is to start on the little things, right? So start by disagreeing well about household issues, right? About a movie that you just saw, about decisions that you have to make about your children's schooling, things like that. And once you develop a skill set of disagreeing well, once you develop a relationship that can withstand that kind of disagreement, then we as citizens can start talking about these harder challenges, political issues. And as Kristi says, I think this is the great challenge of so many countries in the world, which is how do we manage this much diversity and make it move us in a positive rather than negative direction? And that set of skills starts from a young age. It's about the education that we require as citizens, but it also starts by dealing with the everyday things, right? Total politics. The idea is, you know, those political skills are a part of our everyday lives.
Yes.
And I think taking those conversations between citizens, among citizens seriously can help us with that.
Okay. One more question.
Okay.
How about the gestures? It's
These?
not. Yeah. No. The gestures. You know.
Gestures.
The gestures. How you convince. How you. How you move. You know.
Actually, Bo wrote this in this third part.
Okay. In the third part.
Which phase gesture to show agreements, concern, or sympathy.
Like that. I mean, for me, I probably do it too much, as you can see. I need to do it to think, but I don't want to run away from the fact that some of debating is performance, right? And the joy of performance is saying to the listener, I take you seriously, right? You are worth performing for. You're worth the work. You're worth the attention. Because this moment that we're sharing, this conversation we're sharing, deserves the best of me.
Very good.
That's a very good point from Mr. Bo.
So,
Okay.
how to get this book, Kristi?
Yeah.
We're going to have a grand launching in 2 days.
In
It's
2
gonna be-
days?
It's gonna be available in all Gramedia store
Okay.
around Indonesia.
It
So-
means in the 2nd August.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dan sudah diterjemahkan di bahasa Indonesia.
Bahasa Indonesia,
It's
jadi
bahasa.
jangan khawatir teman-teman semua.
Oke.
Ya,
Nah,
untuk
lu coba kasih perspektif dalam bahasa Indonesia biar Bo nggak ngerti ya.
we wanted
So-
to exclude you from the call.
Kenapa kita harus beli buku ini?
Yeah.
Kristi, terakhir.
Pertama, menurut aku yang paling penting adalah gimana kita bisa membangun culture berdebat yang baik, Mas. Karena apalagi next year kan kita ada election ya. Menurut aku itu bakal jadi sebuah momen yang sangat penting buat Indonesia. Kita selalu ngomong Indonesia emas
45.
ya kan 2045. Kita selalu ngomong itu, tapi kita lupa untuk ngomongin gimana sih cara build-nya. Jadi lebih grounded gitu. Gimana kita membangun kultur berdebat yang lebih baik, kita membangun society yang lebih bisa menerima gitu kan, menerima satu sama lain. Karena kita memang kita sangat diverse kan, bineka tunggal ika dan semuanya. Jadi menurut aku ini buku yang sangat life changing juga ketika aku baca. Banyak poin-poin yang aku awalnya nggak berpikir gitu tentang debat, and aku juga tadinya kan I did debating gitu kan. Nah, I think itu satu. Yang kedua, ini penting juga buat our leaders, Mas. Untuk orang-orang yang maksudnya mau jadi DPR, mau apalagi jadi presiden gitu ya, bahwa menurut aku bangsa yang berhasil membangun bangsa dengan baik itulah bangsa yang berpikir, Mas. Bangsa yang bisa berpikir dengan baik gitu loh.
quotes bagus tuh.
Jadi tagline ya.
bisa.
Bangsa yang bisa berpikir dengan baik, berpikir dengan dewasa. Dan menurut aku buku ini bisa membantu kita untuk itu.
Oke.
Kristi just
Cukup menjual.
promotes your books very well in
Very well,
Indonesian.
yeah.
You don't have to worry, you gotta trust her.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to give her a compliment ya for this promo. Okay, thank you Bo, thank
Thank
you
you,
Kristi
Kristi.
for coming and
For
share
you,
with us.
Untuk teman-teman yang suka debat di Twitter, beli buku.
Iya, lo
Betul.
ente jangan debat-debat aja.
Tuh,
dengan
ini
echo
debat
Anda.
echo chamber cuma
Kenapa lo harus keras-keras gitu sih? Mukanya biasa aja lah.
Karena saya adalah korban dari debat Twitter yang tidak bermakna dan tidak ada good arguments di sana.
Oke.
Oke, sampai jumpa di Total Politik berikutnya.
Thank you.
Oke.